That dollar you made yesterday isn't worth as much today. Professor Richard Wolff lays out what inflation is and how it works. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Inflation is in the news principally because there's a bunch of Republicans yelling and screaming that if Joe Biden gets his infrastructure package or if Joe Biden gets his COVID relief package, trillions of dollars, we're going to have to borrow money, put it on our national credit card. It's going to cause inflation. Pretty soon you're going to have to pay 15% to buy a house. Quack, 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 quack. And, I think this is crazy. But I wanted to check with an actual economist and find out, specifically what causes inflation. How does it happen? I have my theories. I can discuss them with Professor Richard Wolff. I'd like to hear his. He's an economist. He's the professor of economics, in fact. He's the co-founder of Democracy at Work. .info, the author of numerous books, including The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. DemocracyAtWork.info and rdwolff with 2 Fs.com, his websites. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff with 2 Fs. Professor Wolff, inflation, when does everything become unaffordable? What exactly is inflation, and what are the things that produce it in economies small and large?
Well, it's one of those phenomena that afflict capitalist economies, as they had before capitalism, that attracts not only attention, but lots of mystification, sort of this magical topic. So in order to understand it, you kind of have to go backwards and become very simply focused. So let's begin. And inflation is defined as a situation when prices in general go up. Not every price and not each price the same amount, but a general rise in prices is all that the word inflation means. Goods and services in general go up in price. Number one. Number two, simple. The people who decide on prices are employers, the people who own and operate businesses, because that's where most goods and services come from. And under a private enterprise system, the individuals who set the prices are the owners, operators, chief executives of corporations. So the first question to understand, the first point, is that if you have a general rise in prices, it's the business community that's doing that. Now the next question, why would the business community do it? Well, the first answer, again, simple, is because it's profitable. It's the easiest, quickest, and best way to make more profits, which is to take whatever it is you're producing and charge more for each unit of it that you sell. In other words, to raise the price. So in many cases, there's an inflation because businesses are raising prices to make more profits. But of course, business never wants to be held accountable for making more profits by raising prices. So it has always been attractive for them and the publicists that they hire to come up with other reasons. And here are the two most usual ones. Number one, it's called cost push inflation. That's when they can say, gee, I'm not raising the price to make more money. I'm only doing it because some cost I have has gone up, and I just want to recoup the money I have to pay extra for the input by raising the price of my output. So, for example, when the oil prices went crazy in the 70s, 80s, and so on, lots of businesses raised their prices, and when asked why, said, well, the price of oil went up. It is, of course, only possible to know whether the price increase the business decided on had anything really to do with the cost price going up of oil. They may have had an oil price go up by 5%, but jacked up their prices by 20%. Unless you could see the books of these companies, which they are not required to show any reporter, well, then they could use the oil as an excuse. The second major reason why businesses could point to something other than their own profit drive was when the government printed a lot of extra money, the way it is doing now, but the way it also did under the Trump administration, which is why what the Republicans are saying is straight out lying. I mean, there's no nice way to say it. Yes, when the government prints a lot more money and people have a lot more money in their hands, then it's possible for businesses to jack up prices because people have the money to pay. And so you can say there's some contribution being made by government printing. But I can give you 100 examples in the history of the last 200 years of capitalism where governments have printed money and it has not produced a great inflation. And the best example is the last 5 or 10 years when we have increased money like it's going out of style, but there's been no general inflation of goods and services because all of that money was either hoarded by rich people or used by them to play in the stock market. There, indeed, was an inflation in the stock market, which is where all that money went. But you can see, as this example shows, that there's no necessary link between borrowing more and printing more money on the one hand and inflation. The easiest way to remember is inflation is something that businesses do, and when they give you a reason why they're doing it, keep in mind that they want to keep you away from understanding that profit drives that decision like
Professor
it drives
Wolff?
most other business decisions.
So perhaps my understanding of this is incomplete. My understanding is that when the Fed creates money, they're literally creating money. That
Yes.
when the federal government, as a consequence of an act of Congress, borrows money and spends that money, they're not printing money. They are merely borrowing money. I'm buying treasury bills. I'm loaning money to the Fed. The Fed is using that loaned money. And if that's not printing money, I don't see where all these Republicans get so hysterical about, oh, the Fed is going to have to borrow money, not the Fed, the Treasury Department is going to have to borrow more money. Our national debt is going up. That's going to produce inflation. What am I missing? Is there a relationship between inflation and national debt?
No necessary relationship. What can happen, and what does sometimes happen, is that when the Treasury has to borrow to cover a budget deficit, it issues those famous IOUs called Treasury securities. And it goes to corporations, rich people, foreign governments, and borrows money that way. The foreign governments, the rich individuals, and the corporations are then free in our system to turn around and sell that Treasury security to the Federal Reserve, which can print the money to buy it. Only if that second thing happens, if the people who lent money to the Treasury turn around and sell those Treasury securities to the Federal Reserve, only then is the money supply increased. And then it depends on what is done by the rich people, corporations, and foreign governments with the money. If they hold on to it or if they use it to speculate in the stock market, there will be no inflation of goods and services, and that's exactly what has happened over the last 5 or 10 years.
So all this hand-wringing about inflation by these Republican senators who are freaked out about the infrastructure spending is just based in nothing?
Absolutely. Their problem is they have to oppose the Democrats. Part of what we had was a monopoly of two parties. Whatever the one party does, the other one has to say something else. They may be afraid that eventually there'll be a tax on corporations and the rich to pay for all this spending, so they'd rather not have the spending. But the stuff about inflation is pure make-believe to give their opposition the appearance of having some national well-being at its core.